Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler, and I am the host and the founder of the Order of Man podcast and movement. I want to first and foremost thank you. We've gotten a lot of feedback from the past several podcasts that we've done. Earlier this week, we did one with Madison Cawthorn, the youngest United States congressman. Mixed reviews on that one, obviously, because anytime you get into politics, you're going to get mixed reviews. But that was a very powerful conversation. And I've also got a lot of feedback on last week's Friday Field Notes, which was get strong, get smart, get rich. So again, mixed reviews, but anytime we get mixed reviews, polarizing thoughts and opinions and ideas, I know that's the right conversation we need to be having, because my goal is to have difficult and sometimes uncomfortable conversations, because nobody else is willing to have them, frankly, or very few people are. We live in a politically correct society, in a world where, we don't want to ruffle any feathers or make anybody feel bad about themselves or their decisions. And I certainly don't set out to piss people off, to make people feel bad, but I'm going to share the truth, and I'm going to share my opinion. And there is a distinction between truth and opinion. I recognize that and realize that and acknowledge it. But I'm going to share those things with you, because these are the conversations that need to be had, and they're the conversations nobody else is having. And specifically, if you're new to this podcast, we're talking about all things manliness and masculinity, which in and of itself seems to be an increasingly polarizing conversation, which is funny because, well, it shouldn't be polarizing. I guess it's not even funny. It shouldn't be polarizing. It should be very clear. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk with you about today, because there is so much confusion about what it means to be a man, and what a man is, and what a male is, and what masculinity is, and what manliness is. And we have all these terms and buzzwords that we use, and they're often misconstrued. People don't completely understand what terms mean, and people don't understand what everybody else's meaning or what their intent is when they use these terms like masculinity, and of course the one we hear quite a bit, which is toxic masculinity. So we're going to define that today. We're going to go through that. Before I do, want to make a quick mention of the exclusive content we have over at Warrior Poet Society Network. A lot of you guys are very familiar with Warrior Poet Society. We do some exclusive content on their new network, which again is called Warrior Poet Society Network. If you go to orderofman.com/WPSN, you can check it out. And if you use the code ORDER, you're going to get a discount for your annual subscription to the network itself. Again, I've got some exclusive content. Tony Santmanot has exclusive content. Of course, Warrior Poet, I believe their show is called War Poet, with John Lovell and his crew over there. So go check it out. I think you guys will really enjoy what they're doing. The best way I can describe it is almost a Netflix for men. So go check it out. Again, orderofman.com/WPSN. All right, guys, we need to lay some foundation here, because again, we have these phrases and these words that are loaded words, and people don't understand what they mean. And you see this weird, it's weird. That's the correct word. It's weird that we have begun to debate what a male is, what a man is, what masculinity is. There's plenty of people out there who are confused and think that just because you believe you are, that you can be a man. That isn't true. We're going to talk about that today. Some of this is opinion, sure, but some of it is also rooted in science and data and biology. We're going to address it all. So the three terms I wanted to specifically break down for you today are: number one, male; number two, masculinity; and number three, manliness. And there's a distinction. There's a difference. We use them interchangeably quite often, and we think that they're synonymous. They're not. They're not synonymous. And it's important that we understand what each of these things means, so that we as men can step more fully into who we are and who we're meant to be. And also we can ward off any sort of perversion of the truth, distortion of the reality of what it means to be a man and what our job and responsibilities and roles are. And what's interesting is, as I talk about this, I already know because I deal with it every day. This one's probably going to get a lot of hate, and it's going to be polarizing. Not for a lot of you, because you agree. And I'm willing to say the things that I think most of you believe, but maybe feel like you can't say or can't talk about. I'm willing to be politically incorrect here, or incorrect, I should say. But as I talk about this, people will say, well, what do you care? What do you care what people think about themselves and who they are? I actually don't care. If you're a woman and you think you're a man, okay, well, that's you can think that. If you're a man and you think you're a woman, or you think you're a man or a woman and you think you're some sort of alien space creature or a different animal, like, okay, that's fine. Whatever. You can think that. People think all sorts of things that are incorrect, and it doesn't impact my life. But this actually does. Because when a man believes himself to be a woman, or vice versa, a woman believes himself to be a man, that actually permeates much of society. It infuses itself into the societal conversation, which is why we have men, biological men, males, who are attempting to infiltrate women's sports. I think that's a problem. I also think it's a problem that a biological male who believes himself to be a woman, based on new executive orders, can be involved with not only sports, but be involved in exclusively female activities in public. For example, the use of restrooms. I'm not interested in having a biological man who believes himself to be a woman going into women's restrooms, women's locker rooms, permeating sports. I'm not interested in that. There's a danger inherent in that. So this is why I care about it. It's a pervasion of the way that society has always functioned. And I'm going to talk about it. Not because I care about what you believe yourself to be, but because it impacts everybody else. So let's address this. It's crazy to me that in 2021, we even need to talk about it, but we do. Apparently we do. And I'll make a stand. This is the hill that I'm planting my flag on. So here we go. Let's talk about the lowest common denominator of what makes a man a man. Number one, a man is a biological male. So that's the term I wanted to share with you first. Male. What does it mean to be a male? It means biologically you are male. You have the right chromosomes. You have the right biology. You have the right physical characteristics. You have the right genitalia. I mean, we don't need to get into this. You guys understand that. What's interesting is every once in a while I have somebody say, well, Ryan, it's not binary. Biology is not binary when it comes to sex. You have males and you have females, but what about intersex people? That's a disorder. That's a medical anomaly. All right, just because there are intersex individuals, and that's scientific, we know there are, that doesn't mean that there's more than two sexes. It just means that we have a medical anomaly, a disorder that falls outside of the two sexes that we see among the animal kingdom, including Homo sapiens. It doesn't create its own sex. It doesn't create its own gender. It doesn't create any third class or tier of individual. It just means this is a medical anomaly that falls outside of the standard. You wouldn't say that human beings have any more or less than 10 fingers and 10 toes, or 2 arms and 2 legs, just because there's a fraction of a percent of individuals who are born with a different number of fingers, or are born without a leg or an arm. You wouldn't say that, well, human beings, we can have this wide range of spectrum when it comes to how many digits and how many toes and how many arms and legs. No, you have 2 arms and 2 legs, human beings, and you have 10 fingers and 10 toes. And yes, there are a few people who fall outside of that, but it doesn't create its own class. It doesn't create its own sex or its own gender. It's a disorder. It's a medical condition that I think we should strive to understand. We should attempt to figure it out, that we should research it. But again, we have males and we have females. That's it. That's all there is. And if you want to be a man, the higher tier, I would say, of maleness, you have to first be a biological male. And people, Ryan, how can you be so exclusive? And you're excluding these people, and you're transphobic, and you're this, and you're no, not at all. Stating the biological truth does not make me any sort of phobic. It doesn't mean that I hate these individuals. It doesn't mean that I don't care about them. It doesn't mean that I think that they should suffer any sort of hardship. These are individuals who are confused, clearly, and we should be empathetic to that. But we don't need to distort reality in order to make them feel better about their own choices. We need to help these individuals so that they can live the most fulfilling life possible. And the only way you can do that is by operating in reality. I would never take a person who's severely obese, for example, and tell them that their own life choices are healthy choices. That might make it easier for them in the short term. It might make me feel better, but that doesn't serve that individual. It only hurts that individual. Instead, we want to put them on the right path where they feel good about who they are and they can accept who they really are. And we'll hear that all the time in the trans community. Well, this is who I really am. No, actually, it's not. Biologically, that is not who you are. You think that, but this is a condition. We know that. It's documented as a medical condition, a disorder. It's not who you are. So, being a man, first and foremost, means that you're biologically male. I don't hate trans people. I don't want them to suffer. I just want to deal in reality so that we can all move forward and grow and expand and become better and accept ourselves for who we are and then advance from there. All right, number 2, let's talk about masculinity. So we've addressed male. Male is you're biologically male, period. End of story, end of discussion. It's not subject to interpretation. It's not open for debate. This has been settled. Male means you have the biological makeup, the chromosomes, the genitalia. You are a male. All right. Number 2, masculinity. Masculinity is a set of characteristics and behaviors and virtues that are developed through hormones, primarily testosterone, that we associate with being male. So dominance, physical strength, aggression, competitiveness. And we have things like the American Psychological Association who'll come out and say, these things are inherently and intrinsically destructive or dangerous to our young men. No, they're not. They're actually amoral. Being strong is amoral. It's not good or bad. Being dominant is amoral. It's not good or bad. Being competitive, being stoic, the things that we would generally associate and attribute to males through their biological markers and makeup are not inherently good or bad. It's how we use them. Masculinity is the testosterone and the hormones coursing through your veins. It's the energy and the enthusiasm and the physical strength and the dominance and the mindset and the mentality. That's what masculinity is. Now, when I talk about this, people will say, well, if that's the case, then why don't you believe in toxic masculinity? It's not that I don't believe in that concept. I actually do understand the concept when some people, and I'm using that deliberately, some people use the term toxic masculinity. I understand what they're attempting to say. They're saying that if you use the masculine characteristics that I just acknowledged and told you were amoral for negative outcomes, then wouldn't that be toxic masculinity? I understand that. I get that. But I don't use that term because it's a loaded term. The fact that we even have to spend a bunch of time discussing what it means, and some people think it means this, and other people think it means that, and it's this term that's been used and manipulated and massaged to paint all masculinity as inherently toxic, means that I'm not going to use that term. Now, my children, my boys in particular, and I've got a daughter as well, but we're talking about boys right now. They're first and foremost, they're males. They're not men, and I'll explain that here in a minute. They're males. We don't expect them to be men yet, so we'll talk about what that means. They have masculinity. As my oldest son, he's about to turn 13. He's becoming more masculine. You can see it in his physical makeup. You can see it in his demeanor and his behavior and activity, and I love to see that development and growth. I need to, as a father who's attempting to do the right things by him, help him harness that masculinity in ways that will serve him and other people. And left unchecked, you have at worst this Lord of the Flies type situation where we have boys running around without direction and discipline and guidance. And you look at, in the wake of a couple of mass shooting situations over the past couple of weeks, you know, most mass shooters, mass killers, I should say, have been documented to be without permanent father figures in the home, which means that their masculinity isn't being directed and channeled and harnessed into productive outcomes. It's been used ineffectively, and it's been destructive and dangerous and violent and catastrophic in many situations. But I'm not going to use the term toxic masculinity because that is a loaded, semantically overloaded term. And it's been politicized and it's been used to push down men altogether. So let's recap here so far, and then we'll get on to the third component of this. So number one, we have male, biologically male. You cannot be a man if you are not biologically male. I know I'm going to get emails and responses and everything else. Well, Ryan, you know, some people think that's fine. You can think whatever you want. It doesn't make it true. In order to be a man, you have to first and foremost be biologically male. Then we have masculinity, which is the raw testosterone and hormones coursing through males' veins that cause them to be generally more competitive, more dominant, more aggressive, potentially more stoic, stronger. This is why men who believe themselves to be women who have been allowed to compete in women's sports will generally dominate those arenas. Of course they will, because biologically they have a huge advantage when it comes to competitive sports. Of course, we know that. There's no scientific study needed for that. We acknowledge that. We recognize that. And if you don't, you're delusional. You're reaching. You're flexing for this like weird kind of reality that just doesn't exist. We know this. We know it. And if you're being objective and you're being reasonable, you know that. That's a danger. That's a threat. And these individuals who say, well, we believe in women's rights. Well, really? Do you? Do you believe in that? If you're going to allow men to compete in women's sports where they have a huge, huge physical and mental advantage in those situations, and you're going to allow those people to dominate women who would secure scholarships and career opportunities and access to education, you're going to deny them that because you can't face the reality? That's insane. That is insane. So we have male, we have masculinity. Now let's talk about manliness. What does it mean to be a man? Now, a lot of people will say, well, you just have to have a dick and balls to be a man. No, that isn't true, because that would describe my sons, my 3 sons. Are they men? No. So of course that isn't true. I just debunked anybody who ever said that all it takes is your genitalia to be a man in 10 seconds? Because our children, our boys, are not men. We don't expect them to be, and yet they have the right anatomy. There's something more to it. So what does it mean to be a man? First and foremost, a man is a biological male. You can think you're a man, you're not. And I know people say, well, Ryan, gender is different than sex. It's actually very closely connected, and we know that. We've been talking about that forever, and it isn't until relatively recently that we've begun to separate the two. But let's just, for the sake of argument, assume that's the case. Okay, well, then I'm talking about sex. Man is clearly defined. It doesn't mean woman. It doesn't mean woman who thinks she's a man. It doesn't mean that. Man means biological male first and foremost. Now there's more to it, because again, I just explained that my sons are not men yet. So in order to be a man, or what I would say manliness, is a male, a biological male who takes his chemical and hormonal and biological makeup, mostly testosterone, and of course other hormones as well, and directs those and harnesses those and challenges those and tweaks and adjusts and uses them as tools to promote effective outcomes for himself and for other people. You can see it on my hat. The logo for the motto for Order of Man is protect, provide, preside. To serve. This is what a man does. He protects, he provides, and he presides. And he takes his masculinity and he takes his maleness and he harnesses them into effective outcomes to serve himself and other people. And if he isn't doing that, then he isn't acting manly. And I've been there. I'll be the first to admit that there's been things in my life that I've done that don't represent manliness. I've taken advantage of people. I've stolen from people. I've manipulated people, just like we all have. And that is not manliness. It's anything but. If you're hurting other people, you're getting ahead at their expense. That's not manliness. That doesn't make you a man. You might still be a male, but you're acting more like a prepubescent boy, a child, than you are a man. Manliness is about taking what you have through your biological makeup and refining it and crafting it and honing it and putting it through a series of processes and systems that will allow you to produce for yourself and other people, to serve effectively, to lead, to protect people in violent situations and dangerous encounters and emergency situations, to provide the financial resources that your family and your community need to survive and live their best lives. That's the work of men. And that's what we're doing here in the Order of Man podcast. And we've been going as of today. In fact, it's March 24th as I'm recording this. I think this will be released on the 26th. The 24th is the official 6-year anniversary of the Order of Man podcast. And so we've been talking about it for the last 6 years. How do we take the fact that we're male and our masculinity and direct it towards positive outcomes? That's what defines you. It isn't what you think of yourself. It isn't how you feel. It isn't the ideas that are bouncing around in your brain. It isn't the information or podcasts or books that you've consumed. It's what you do that makes you a man. It's not what you think or believe or act or behave or read. It's what you do. Are you harnessing your masculinity? And some of us are, and some of us aren't. And most of us, and I would place myself in this category, are somewhere in between. Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. The whole goal is to move the needle from 50-50 or not acting manly at all to we're acting manly most of the time and we're providing value and we're adding and enhancing to people's lives. That's what it means to be a man. And some of you will say, well, women can do that too. Sure, they can. Sure, they can. I'm not saying that they can't. I'm not saying that women don't add value. I'm not saying that women aren't important. This is why we need to make these distinctions, because women can do some of this stuff. Women can be strong in their own right. Women can and do, my wife, for example, and my daughter, and plenty of other women that I know, add value to themselves, to their families, to their communities, to the businesses they work in, to every facet of life. They do, of course. So I'm not suggesting that they can't. I'm suggesting that we as males need to strive to work ourselves towards becoming men. And again, I'm going to reiterate, right? People will say, well, Ryan, why do you care? Why do you care what people think? Why do you care if a woman believes herself to be a man? Why do you care if a man believes himself to be a woman? You can think whatever you want. The walls of your home, you can think whatever you want. But when it starts to permeate society and impact the way that we view people, the things that we do, it starts to have a negative outcome. Sports is a prime example, allowing men who believe themselves to be women to interact in women's circumstances in private situations where they should be, I don't want to say sheltered necessarily, but protected. Sure, of course. Why would we do that? To make somebody feel okay with their choices? Ryan, it's not a choice. No, it is a choice. It is a choice. We all have different desires and ideas. And yet each and every one of us can decide, do we act on it or not? That's a decision. So this is an important conversation. And it's going to become more so. And it's going to become increasingly more difficult and taboo and politically incorrect to discuss what I'm discussing with you today, which is actually the reason, or part of the reason, that we should be talking about this. Because I want a healthy, functioning society. I don't want to acquiesce to people who are confused about who they are and then allow those conversations to permeate society and permeate the way in which we live our lives. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to talk about it, and it's not going to be popular, and people are going to be pissed, and I'm going to get thrown under the bus. And you know what? Fine. So be it. Because this is the hill. This is the hill that I've decided I'm going to defend. And it's the hill that's worth fighting for myself, for men, for my family members, for my sons and my daughter. This is the hill. For your sons and daughters, this is the hill. So I'm going to keep talking about it. And if you agree with me, then I need you to talk about it. And I need you to share it. And I need you to get more men involved in this. And what I also need you to know is that I get messages every single week from individuals who say they believe in what I believe, but they can't share it. Can't, quote unquote, can't. That's a problem. Do you see that's a problem? You can't express your perspective, your viewpoint. That is anti-American. That is the antithesis of freedom and what we're all about. You can't because you're worried about losing your job. You can't because somebody may think worse of you. That's again, the antithesis of what it means to be American, which is freedom. And particularly in the First Amendment, freedom of speech. You should be able to say what you want to say without fear of retribution. Now, I know that doesn't always exist, and there are consequences to what we say, of course. I'm not saying there shouldn't be. But if you're afraid of losing your job, that's actually the problem. If you're afraid of being, quote unquote, canceled, that's the problem. That's one of the reasons you should actually speak up. And you may have to have some sacrifices. But you know what? If more people did this, then we would see this stuff less and less. Guys will talk about the silent, just wait until the silent majority wakes up. Well, wake up. When are you going to wake up? I've been hearing that term for the past 2 decades. Once the silent majority wakes up, then, you're in for some real trouble. Really? When are you going to wake up? When are you going to speak up? When are you going to stand up? When are you going to talk about truth and reality and the way that this society is best going to be functioning? When are you going to do that? I'm going to do it. If you don't know how to do it, or you don't totally feel comfortable doing it at this point, share what we're doing. That's a great way to start. Share what we're doing here. I'm not afraid to talk about these things. These things should be talked about. So share it, guys. It's important. It's important for us, but I think even more so because I believe unless we are willing to speak up and speak out like I'm talking with you about, it's only going to get worse for our sons and daughters and their sons and daughters. And I care about them. I care about my children. I want them to win. I want them to thrive. And unless I'm willing to be a man and do what needs to be done now and say the things that need to be said and have the conversations that need to be had right now, it's only going to get worse. So share. All right. You can share this podcast. You can take a screenshot and post it on social media. You can send a text to somebody. You can leave a rating and review. You can purchase one of our products. There's 1,000 different ways to support what we're doing here. You can figure that out, how to do that. But ultimately, what I want to talk about is what it means to be a man. I want to talk about what it means to be a male, which is biologically male. I want to talk about masculinity. I want to talk about harnessing that for productive outcomes and turn that masculinity into manliness. This is what I'm going to talk about. And if it's important to you, then I would ask that you share. All right? Share it. It's important. All right, guys. That's all I've got for you today. We'll dive deeper into these subjects and more. If you have other subjects and ideas and things you want to talk about, let me know. We'll answer those questions or thoughts and ideas on the Ask Me Anything, or I'll address it on a Friday Field Notes. The best place at this point to connect with me is on Instagram. That's at Ryan Michler. My last name is Michler, at Ryan Michler. Connect with me there. Shoot me an email or a message there. Let me know what conversations you want to have. Let's blow this thing up. We need to blow this thing up. This needs to become a force to be reckoned with in society. And 2021 is the perfect year to do it. It's the needed year to do it. So let's get after it. Guys, I'll be back next week with a powerful conversation with, maybe I won't spoil it, but it's very powerful from an individual who many of you are very, very familiar with, who has been on his own self-development journey and process and growth. And I think you're really going to enjoy it. So make sure you subscribe, leave a rating and review, connect with me on the Instas and everywhere else. And we'll be back next week. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.